being here. It's a pleasure to be here, even though I had to deal with I-10 and the Turnpike in 75. But I think we all deal with that on a daily basis in Florida. When I got the call to see if I could present to the Bergstrom Center, the Warrington College of Business, I left at the chance to give something back to the college that has given so much to me. I am not a graduate of the Warrington College of Business, but I met my wife in, this will be an age check, in the replay room. Okay. So you used to have to watch the classes, but it wasn't digital. You had to rent a video, check it out, and my wife worked in the replay room. It was probably the only shot I had to win her over was my face surrounded by Mark Rush and Dave Denton. So with that, thank you for having me here. I'm here to talk a little about the Florida story and what it might mean for you and your business in the year ahead. I worked regionally for about 20 years and recently came to the Florida Chamber Foundation. I've realized a couple things. There's about 37 billion love bugs in this state, half of whom I killed last summer. And Florida's just really big, right? Here's Florida from space. It's at night, you can get a sense of where the economy is, where the people are. All of those bright lights that you see here are going to continue to get brighter, and continue to grow over the next year, next 7 years, next 27. Right? We're going to have a future in Florida, and Florida's going to be bigger. And we can just allow nature to take its course, or we can strategize, and we can say, what do we want Florida to be? And it's one thing to say we've got a goal. We've got a goal for Florida to become the 10th largest economy in the world. Right now, you might be surprised to know that Florida, if it were an independent nation, is the 16th largest economy in the world. We're larger than Saudi Arabia, we're larger than the Netherlands, we're larger than Switzerland. Our goal is to get to 10, which means surpassing Mexico sometime in the next year and a half and reaching the size of South Korea by the year 2030. You can have a goal, but without a plan, what you have is a wish, right? And so the plan is the Florida 2030 blueprint. That's the strategic plan created not by the Florida Chamber Foundation, but by thousands of Floridians. And it is stewarded and championed by the Florida Chamber Foundation, as well as many other organizations around the state. So within there's 39 goals, and it's things like reducing childhood poverty. It's also growing our economy to be the largest in the United States. If we're going to be the 10th in the world, we've probably got to be the largest in the U.S. And again, the growth is coming. Those bright lights on the big map are going to get brighter and bigger. We're going to expect in the next 7 years, 2.8 million new residents to this state. We're going to need, just to maintain at current levels of labor force participation and current levels of unemployment, we're going to need to add nearly 1.5 million jobs in the next 7 years. In the year 2030, we're going to see 40 million more annual visitors than we have already, coming here, emptying their pockets, and driving back home or flying back home happy. And we're going to have 2.4 million more drivers on our roads. Half of those 2.4 million will either be at Champions Gate in I-4, Wildwood in 75, or Sawgrass Expressway in 95. That's the one thing you can take to the bank from this presentation today. To learn more about the strategic plan for Florida's future, I'd encourage you to visit florida2030.org. So everything we do at the foundation builds towards that goal of getting to the 10th largest economy by the year 2030. And we track a lot of data and we try to understand as best we can. So I'm here today to share some of our research with you about what's underpinning Florida's growth, industries that we see growing, and the ramifications it has for your business. So I talked about those 2.8 million new people, and I said that some of those bright lights are going to get brighter. The map shows percentage increase, okay? So that can sometimes be dictated by a small denominator. This is a smart crowd. I can use words like numerator and denominator. So you see it's mostly the smaller counties that are having the larger percentage growth rates, and that's that top growth rate table. But pay attention to that table that's on the left-hand side, where it says top projected increase. More than half of those 2.8 million new people are going to just 5 of our 67 counties. 80%, more than 80% of the people we expect to come to Florida are going to just 10 counties within this state. Okay, so that's the projection through 2030. We're going to take a little look back and a little look at the present to understand who these people are, where they're coming from, and where they're going within the state. Talk numerator and denominator. Florida's a big denominator state, right? 23.5 million people, right? So to get large percentage increases in anything in Florida is a tremendous task. These are 3 different time periods to talk about household formation, right? So a household, is a census, concept. It's, somebody that needs a roof over their head. And that can be a family or it can be an individual, etc. Over the 11-year period, Florida had the 3rd largest percentage increase in households in the nation, right? Again, big denominator state. Almost double the US rate of 11.3%. In the most recent 5 years, again, Florida almost double, slight dip in terms of rankings. And again, and sometimes it's smaller states like Utah or Idaho that are, growing households at a faster rate. But look at those last 2 years, right? In between, kind of the last pre-pandemic year through the latest year that we have data for. Florida had the largest percentage increase in households in the United States, more than double the US rate, right? So the growth is here and it is accelerating, right? Something to keep in mind. Not only is it people and households that are coming to Florida, but what we're seeing in a new sense, much more so than we've seen before, is the income they're bringing with them. And part of that is a demographic change of who's moving here. Rather than somebody finishing their job or finishing their career in one state and then moving to Florida to enjoy the rest of their life, they are moving to Florida first, finishing up their career, and then getting on with the business of enjoying retirement. And so we moved from $2 million per hour of net income moving to the state to $2.7 million per hour, every hour of every day. Okay? And it incorporated a leap year, so I want you to know I ran the numbers and it was 366 days, not 365. So the numbers here are right. It's a 35% increase in the amount of income that's coming to this state. And so that is a different type of migrant to our area. We gained wealth from 47 of 50 states plus DC. We only lost wealth to 3 states, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Wyoming. Just those top 5, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, California, which appeared on this list for the first time in some years, and Pennsylvania. Some of those are traditional sources of population in Florida, but they haven't been traditional sources of income, and certainly not to the extent that we see reflected in the numbers. So just those top 5, compared to the only 3 we lost to, it's a 49x delta, right? Every dollar we lost to those 3, we gained 49 just from the top 5. And you take a look at those states in the bottom part of the slide. Those are some comparison states. These are the ones that have large economies that Florida is looking to leapfrog. New York lost $2.2 million per hour between 2019 and 2020. California, more than $2 million per hour. Illinois, almost $1 million. In Texas is listed there because Texas was number 2. So that's 3.5 times more income coming to Florida during that time period than came to the number 2 state. The source of this data is something that the IRS puts out. It's their statistics of income, and it's basically, they redacted personal information. If it's too small of a sample, they say we can't tell you. And it's, somebody filed a tax return in state A in 1 year, and then in Florida in the next year, or vice versa, and you net it all out, and that's how you get these figures. So you roll it all up, $2.7 million per hour, 24 hours a day, 366 days in this particular year, and it's $23.7 billion of net income that migrated to the state of Florida between those 2 years. And this is Florida compared to the states ranked 2 through 7. So you have to add up 2 through 7 to basically equal the amount of net income that Florida received during this time period. And again, this is, a point of pride. It shows that, things are going right in Florida and people are, coming here, with their families, their feet, and their wallets. But it also is showing that there is a different type of relocation occurring to Florida than what we've seen in the past. More recently, we've seen things like, U-Haul has, said Florida is the #2 destination on net for one-way moves. A lot of those I don't know if any of you have ever moved in a U-Haul recently. You would not want to do that long distance, right? So Texas was #1, and I kind of wonder, well, gosh, Texas borders a lot of other states. Florida borders too, right? You think about what is like the average length that you would drive a U-Haul with all your stuff before you would just like drive yourself off the road. And so I kind of, put this a little bit aside. We do have some very recent data, because that IRS data is looking at 2019 to 2020. It takes a while to redact and to, make it non-disclosable so that you can't tell. I know somebody who moved here from, Clackamas County, Oregon. Let me look them up and see how much they make. So they take care of that. U-Haul, of course, is year 2022. I have up-to-date data as of last week. So this is driver's license swaps. There's reciprocity between states. You move here and you decide, I'm going to stay here. One of the things you got to do is you got to go get a new state driver's license, right? Keep your old cell phone number, okay? But you get a new driver's license. So this is between January of 2022 through last Friday. And these are the numbers of driver's license swaps that we've seen in the state of Florida during that time period. And again, not everybody's going to swap their license right away. And certainly, children under the age of 16 don't have a driver's license to swap. So this is more instructive in terms of, where are folks coming from? And again, we see those top states, New York, New Jersey, California, Pennsylvania, Illinois. And so that is giving, some thought that when we see the next statistics of income from the IRS be revealed, we'll continue to see that strong migration of dollars to the state as well. All of which is very important when we get to the economic forecast at the end of the remarks. And so, just kind of saying how concentrated is this? Well, the top 5 states, and every state, sent people to Florida and, had people that said, I want a Florida driver's license because now they're, portrait instead of landscape. 36.4% of the driver's license swaps just came from the top 5 states. And when we get to the top 10 out of 50, it's 57.1. So again, some of these are traditional feeder patterns to the state. And when we talk about where are these folks going, so here's the top 5. There's some common threads in here. One, we see some of those states that are projected to, #1, get the largest number of new residents. But we also see communities in this list like Lee County, which was in the top 10, but is one of the largest receivers of new residents based on the driver's license data from New York, Pennsylvania, and Illinois. So one thing that I noticed in here is those traditional kind of, what's the I-95, travel market, what's the I-75 travel market. Those things continue to be here. A lot of that is cultural, but there is also, this notion that when they are coming here, they are now bringing their money with them. So, important, to take a look at this and continue to monitor it. And it's, the most up-to-date data that we have. So it's good look into where the future is leading. So on to the economy. Florida surpassed New York in terms of population about 8 years ago. We're the third largest state in terms of population. It took a while for us to catch up economically, a lot of it driven by some of this migration we saw. So Florida is now the third largest state for employment in the nation, past New York in December. More than 9.5 million private sector jobs in the state of Florida. We saw 440,000 jobs created year over year, very strong growth rate, almost like 5%. On a monthly basis, November to December, these are seasonally adjusted, if that means anything to anybody, but it takes into account sort of holidays and stuff like that. Still, a pretty good job growth, but not, where you would multiply it by 12 and get to 440, so a little slowing in terms of the job creation. When we talk about where is that within certain industries, I want to highlight the one that's at the top there. These are organized top to bottom based on percentage growth year over year. And so leisure and hospitality had the largest percentage growth. And it's also a big industry, right? There's a lot of folks that work in restaurants, hotels, recreation, things like that. And again, when you have a large denominator to get a big percentage change, that is, adding a significant number of jobs. It's also important because leisure and hospitality was the very last industry to return to pre-pandemic levels of employment. Florida, between, and almost every other state, right? It wasn't just Florida. We saw tremendous job loss between St. Patrick's Day, that's correlated, it wasn't caused by St. Patrick's Day, but St. Patrick's Day and 6 weeks later, okay? In Florida, our experience is that we lost 1.3 million jobs in 6 weeks. That's how many people went from having a job to not having in 6 weeks. In contrast, to give an idea, just the magnitude of the shock to the employment market, we all remember the great financial crisis, the housing bubble, the recession of the late aughts, getting into the teens. To go from the peak, or to go from the highest level of employment to the lowest level of employment during the great financial crisis, took 4 years. The nation surpassed that in 6 weeks, and gradually, as the Florida began to reopen, was one of the first ones out of the gate, started growing jobs. Did not return to pre-pandemic levels of employment until October 2021. Leisure and hospitality, as I mentioned, did not return until October of 2022. So seeing them return to their pre-pandemic employment levels, it was kind of like, okay, now all of us economists can put this behind us in terms of, what's left to recover from the pandemic. But also, manufacturing is one of the keys to growing the economy. It's one that will help us, tap into global markets. It's one that drives a lot of commercial real estate when it's in your community. And, pleased to see manufacturing have a strong percentage growth of almost 7%. It's one of those primary industries, right, where products go out and money comes in, and that's how an economy grows. So economic developers and others love to see manufacturing jobs. And governments like them too, because, there's a lot of equipment to tax. So, that's sort of the annual view. When we take a look at the monthly view, we are starting to see the impacts of the interest rate increases on the job market, right? A little bit of, decline as a percentage basis in leisure and hospitality, but down there, financial activities. So that's everything from finance, insurance, and real estate. They used to call that the FIRE group. And, within that, it was the finance, it was the lending side, and it was the transaction side that saw the declines in employment. That was the second month in a row. And so we're hoping that, those losses, somewhat stymie, and then the sector returns to employment sooner rather than later. But, a lot of that is predicted by whether or not someone feels like it's a good time to take out a loan, to purchase a home. And even though at 6%, that's a somewhat historically low mortgage rate for a home, people have short memories, right? So It's also for a lot of folks trading a 3% mortgage for a 6% mortgage. And that's also what's different about, what's going on in, more the housing side. People aren't racing to get out of a bad mortgage. Most people are in a fixed rate, low rate mortgage that are homeowners within the state of Florida. So, and we'll talk a little bit what that means to the housing market in a moment. But overall, the story in Florida over the past decade has been one that's very positive for growing the economy, for growing jobs, and again, above that, all industries, which is sort of the average. So if you're above all industries, you grew faster. If you're below all industries, you grew a little bit slower. Two things I want to point out here. Construction, very strong employment growth, but all those other sectors that are above the all industry list, those are also components of what we would call those primary industries that help grow the economy. And again, everything we do at the foundation in our 39 goals is towards that big goal of moving from 16th to 10th. So we need more of this primary industry. Another thing I point out is, this is a little bit of a more expansive view. The other tables were private sector jobs. I included government in this one. In 10 years, all jobs have grown by 28%. Government jobs in Florida have grown 2.7%. So many of our governments being good stewards and being very efficient with the dollars that are provided to them through taxes. In terms of where we are kind of right now, we talked about people betting on Florida with their feet, their households, their pocketbooks. We're also seeing Florida continue a somewhat record streak. I think this is about the 35th month in a row that we've seen Florida lead in business formation. So these are applications to start a business. Not every application to start a business converts to a business, but you've got to have the pipeline here to make that happen. So almost 52,000 business formations in the month of January, which is more than those larger states. Again, California, Texas, New York, the states we're looking to overtake in terms of gross domestic product and help us reach number 1 in the US, number 10 in the world. And business formations, households, income moving in, Florida has also had a very strong growth rate in its GDP. Number 4, this is an area where small denominators have kept Florida out of the number 1 spot. So small states like Utah, Idaho have had larger percentage increases. But real GDP, so this is taking into account the effects of inflation, and we're looking at apples to apples dollars here. Florida has grown its GDP over the last 4 years by 13.4%. Those other large states, Florida has almost doubled up most of them, right? And again, this is all about leapfrogging and getting to number 1 in the US and getting to number 10 in the world. And I'd say that Florida has very much closely doubled up the overall growth rate of the United States economy. Again, in real dollars, adjusted for inflation. So, the housing market, we had a large bubble in the housing market. This is single family homes, by the way. The blue line there is the rolling 12-month average. We have a scorecard at the Florida Chamber Foundation. It's available at theFloridascorecard.org. You've seen the little URL at the bottom of some of these slides. As soon as we get updates to the data, we put it on the scorecard. Sometimes the scorecard data can be a little misleading, and I shouldn't say that because it's like my job to make sure that it's like good data. But we set it up originally as a month-to-month thing. And there's a lot of seasonality in things like purchasing a home, right? You want to move into a place in time for school to start. You want to, get done with that transaction in a given calendar year for tax purposes. So looking at January to December is not always the best thing to do. So we do a 12-month rolling average. And you saw that, somewhere in July of 2021, we peaked at somewhere around 29,500 sales of single-family homes over the previous 12 months, right? So that is a significant number of sales. Right now, in January of 2023, we are somewhere around 23,000. So those sort of 2-year and 2-year bars are kind of converging on each other. Starts of single-family homes also down year over year, about 31%. Sales down year over year, 32%. So that gets rid of that seasonality. Those are January to January and December to December, irrespectively. But, I talked about this being a different sort of housing issue than we saw during the great financial crisis. People aren't racing to get out of a bad mortgage. They aren't in over their heads on their home. And so we're not seeing any erosion, really, in the prices of single-family homes. And that's good for household balance sheets. It's probably good for consumer sentiment. If we didn't have good household balance sheets and people didn't feel good about the equity in their home, I don't know how our consumer sentiment could get much lower. And kudos to the Bureau of Economic and Business Research at the University of Florida for tracking consumer sentiment in the state of Florida. So we're still at about $390,000 as the median sales price. And I know this is a smart group. I don't mean to say, half above, half below is the median. But there, I said it. Just that way nobody will feel embarrassed. So again, year over year, median sales price is up about 4%, but that is a slight decline from the previous month. And at the end, I'll give the Chamber Foundation's 2023 forecast and let you know where we expect single-family home prices to end up. So we talked about price stability being good for household balance sheets, good for the consumer sentiment. It's not so good if you're looking to buy a house and you're saying, man, I was hoping this was my shot to get in on something. We track affordability at the Chamber Foundation. It's one of our 2030 blueprint goals through a concept called housing burden. Housing burden is a renter-based statistic. But what it's saying is that a household that rents is considered housing burden if they spend more than 30% of their monthly income on their monthly housing costs. And if I had told you that 56.8% of renting families in Florida are spending more than 30% of their income on their housing costs, many of you probably wouldn't have believed it, but that's the case. And this is actually, because we're looking at it, on a zip code level also, we're looking over a larger time frame. So the true number currently is probably a little bit larger. In addition to, that majority of renting families that are spending 30% or more of their income on their housing costs, we've got almost 29% of renting families that are spending more than 50% of their income on their housing costs. So, there's a push and pull, there's the yin and the yang. Top line, we need to increase housing supply. And, this is the group where the great minds are in that are going to help us figure out how to do that over the period so that we can continue to grow Florida's economy, grow Florida's workforce. Again, laser focused on that number 10 goal. Because right now, we're hearing and we're seeing it in the employment data. So that what we're seeing in the employment data is that for every 100 open jobs in the state, right? So there's programs that go out there and figure out, job postings, and they deduplicate them so that somebody posted it in multiple places. We're not talking about the same job. For every 100 open jobs in the state of Florida, there's only 70 people looking for work, right? So that's an imbalance between supply and demand. And so when that happens, prices go up, wages go up. We're seeing that within a lot of our inflation data, where it's, energy costs are still increasing, food costs are still increasing, but many national and international economists continue to become more concerned about something they call super core inflation, which is the inflation that is related to labor. Because unlike a gallon of gas or a kilowatt of electricity, those commodities don't have a care in the world because they're non-sentient. They don't care what they're worth. Your employees might, right? So it's hard to go to an employee and say, hey, listen, when I hired you, you were worth this. Let's talk about bringing you down. That's a difficult conversation. It happens. But what more frequently happens is that that there are, mass shocks, layoffs to labor markets. So, this is just showing, and this data is available at floridagapmap.com. You can see housing burden and any other number of metrics at the zip code level. Florida scorecard tracks the state of Florida in our 67 counties. Our Florida Gap Map takes a look at all 983 of Florida's zip codes. And, the table there is, for buyers. So this is just a snapshot of South Florida that shows, Florida in comparison. So it's talking about increases in prices, and that, I'm sorry, that was not updated. So this is December, not January. But the story is kind of the same. See large percentage growth in Broward, slightly smaller percentage growth in prices in Miami-Dade and Palm Beach, but look at those median sales prices, right? I mean, that's a significant increase over the statewide average. And when we talk about cash sales, this is a function of both, equity coming in, the ability to buy a house all cash, and also, somebody is, it's reflective of fewer transactions in total. So all cash deals are now a larger part of those median sales prices. But this has an impact on affordability too, because it's not the top end of the market. When we see a change in the all cash percentage, it's not the top of the market that's affected. It's more, where is that middle of the market? And it's that middle of the market that is more susceptible and is pulled away from being attainable from the folks who serve our community. So nurses, first responders, et cetera. So I talked about what we're seeing in the data in the labor market, and that's that, only 70 people looking for work for every 100 open jobs. What we're hearing in our conversations with employers, large hospital systems, Orlando Health, Baycare, others, this is not attributable to either of those. It's another large health system. They're having a hard time recruiting registered nurses to this state. Those folks are not poorly compensated, right? That's, an $85,000 or $90,000 a year job. And when those people say, I can't find any place to live, that's when you know that you've got a affordability and attainability crisis, not, for low to moderate income, but for everybody. So again, we need to solve that by housing supply. And the truth is, the built environment going forward in Florida is likely to look different than what, if people think Florida residential real estate, what's coming down in the future years is likely to be more dense, likely to incorporate a lot of other things. You'll see multi-story developments in areas that you would never have thought 15 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, would be home to multi-story developments. We also have a man-made tax on housing affordability and all property within the state of Florida. This gets specifically to homeowners insurance, but it's a property crisis impact in the state of Florida. The heat map there shows those dark red areas are, all of the counties are coded based on the ratio of homeowners insurance premium to median household income. So it's an affordability that differs based on incomes within a community. And, some of those least affordable, you'd say that's coastal, high hazard, et cetera. In Franklin County, and I dove into the data, it is on the coast. There's not much development on the coast of Franklin County. It's largely a function of the cost of insurance and the lower incomes there. Florida homeowners insurance premiums are roughly three times larger than they are nationally, right? So that is a significant impact on affordability for homes. And again, this data available on the Florida scorecard. So what's causing all that? Well, I've got two very tastefully colored pie charts here. Normally I have to use chamber colors. I was very pleased to get from Nikki a template, based on my, my alma mater to redo all of these. Florida is home to about 7% of the nation's claims against homeowners insurance. Florida is home to about 77% of the lawsuits related to homeowners insurance, right? And so that, if there's an alternate definition of insanity, this might be it. And so we're very pleased, and this is something, not me and the foundation, because we're looking out 2 to 20 years and we do research, but within the chamber enterprise, we have an advocacy arm and we have also a political arm. It's something my colleagues in the other 2 silos of the chamber have been working on for several years, and we've gotten some good movement on there. And this is things like one-way attorney's fees, assignment of benefits, things like that really gunk up the system, encourage a lot of frivolous lawsuits. I was mentioning to Nikki and others that I had a presentation this morning in Tallahassee and was making my way down here. I started counting the number of billboards that encouraged me to find somebody to sue, right? And I ran out of fingers real quick and didn't think it was safe to take off my socks and shoes. And I can only count to 10 without a calculator. So I didn't get very far. I don't even think I got out of Leon County before I got to 10. And there's probably more billboards encouraging somebody to sue somebody in Florida than anywhere else on the planet. And it's because we have a system that encourages it. But there's good steps being taken. We had a good special session towards some of reducing some of those impacts, and more to come in the upcoming legislative session. Real quick, I was going to invite one of you up to come and talk about this because you all know this better than I. This is good time for warehouse in the state of Florida. Decent time for retail in the state of Florida. Most markets, with the exception of Miami and this data, not doing so hot on the office side. And in fact, where we are here in Orlando is actually seeing a reduction in rents for Class A full service over the past year. So, when we talk about, this is a good indicator of where the economy is going, right? And, what has happened. And we've seen changes to supply chains, we've seen changes to buying patterns, right? I mean, that huge, and file this under only in America. It must be like a 400,000 square foot warehouse just outside of Ocala for Chewy, right? Okay, stuff for our pets. And so it's things like that that are disrupting the way people interact with the economy and how we buy, and reshoring of supply chains is probably likely to see warehousing, and it's not reflected in this data, but Flex also was in there as well. And that's all in response to the economy and how the economy is moving. Why is the office market the way it is? Not everybody's back to work. A lot of folks are only going back to an office a couple days a week. Some folks in the tech sector have said, I'm not going to make any of my people come back because employment in the tech sector is so difficult to find people in specific skills. The best thing that ever happened to me was being able to attract workforce from beyond my borders. So again, this is more reflective than predictive, but these trends that underlie this do not seem to show any sign of abating moving forward. So, Chamber's 2023 forecast. This is girded with 2 things. One is the fact Florida's strong fundamentals of population growth and income migration. And another, constant in all of this is the likelihood in 2023 or 2024 of a mild United States recession, right? Which is sort of the consensus forecast from the economists we spoke with. So we expect 2023 to be another strong year of job growth, and historically, strong, more than 250,000 jobs. I don't think it's going to be, near 500,000 jobs, and that's likely due to, potential downturn naturally. But again, what used to happen when the nation had a downturn? When the nation had a downturn, Florida would go in quicker, be deeper, come out later, and we don't expect that. So this is a monumental difference, really, in the Florida economy compared to previous recessions. Population growth is going to remain strong, but probably not to the extent we saw. There was a lot of COVID in what inspired people to move to Florida, and nobody's like saying that there wasn't. But, you know, there's still strong fundamentals here in Florida, and so while we don't expect to see, you know, 1,200 people a day move to Florida, we expect it to be somewhere around 983. And, you know, just so you know, more than 100% of Florida's population growth is due to people moving here. I'll say that again. More than 100% of Florida's population growth is due to people moving here. And that's because of something we call in the demographics business, net natural decrease. Okay, so Florida is one of a handful of states where we have more deaths than births. And it's a function of a lot of our demographics in here. Not in here. Here. So, you know, that, although I did see a couple at a park the other night that are doing their darndest to turn the tide. You know, so more than all of our population growth is due to people moving here. And that's probably not going to discontinue in the near future. There's pockets in Florida where you have a net natural increase, but their trend is to get below that sort of cradle versus casket Mendoza line in the near future. We expect Florida's unemployment rate to continue to be low relative to the United States, and that workforce availability and the participation rate will continue to be an issue. There's a lot of things we're doing about this on the foundation side, which is, you know, sort of encouraging employers to look past what may have been a filter that employers would use in the past, but really, what are the skills necessary to do this job? Does this job, which heretofore had required a bachelor's degree, for example, or an associate's degree, does it really require that, or are there ways that a candidate can, you know, show their capability to doing this in alternate means? So it's kind of skills-based hiring, and again, just kind of throwing a wider net and encouraging more participation in the labor market. We see stronger GDP growth in Florida's economy versus the U.S. as a whole over the next year. That does not mean that it's going to be positive, but rather that if the U.S., for whatever reason, takes a real deep dive, Florida may follow it, but it won't be as deep. So stronger GDP, and in this case, growth is equivalent. But we don't think that Florida is going to, you know, turn down in terms of GDP. We think it'll be positive. Inflation continues to be a significant concern among chamber members and businesses at large. You know, very much so. It's been, you know, food, as I mentioned earlier, that has replaced electricity as the number one driver of inflation. Inflation is currently at 6.4%. Energy is I think 8.3, and food inflation is 10.1. So sort of a difference from where we were before. We're going to see Florida return to kind of that pre-pandemic level of housing sales, so around 23,000 over the year, and probably construction of, so on a rolling average, 23,000 per month over the year. So yeah, do the math. I'm not that good with figures. 80 to 85,000 construction of single-family housing units. We are at the chamber, ramping up a new and revamped scorecard that will take into account multifamily. I think housing was originally put in there. It's more of a barometer of the economy as a whole, and not so much the housing market. But with affordability and employee attraction being so important, we are, taking a lot of steps to incorporate multifamily into our, analysis and research. And, we expect Florida to continue to lead in income migration when new data is released at the end of the year. Couldn't do the work I do without the support of, our community development partners at the Florida Chamber Foundation. These are the folks that power our Florida scorecard and help Florida businesses unite for good. So if you see one of these businesses, and everybody's going to see a Publix, so thank your cashier for being a community development partner. He or she will have no idea what you're talking about, but you'll make me feel good, and for that, thank you. I think I have a few minutes to answer any questions. I don't know how you want to go ahead and do that, just shout out. Or... Jump on a table, oh, the microphone, handsome, what is the ball? Any questions?
What solutions are on the horizon for the insurance crisis?
So primarily, it is the revocation of, kind of these one-way attorney's fees, where there is a tremendous incentive for, and this is why you see the billboards encouraging you, is there somebody I can sue? Because if an attorney receives $1 more than what an insurance company offers in a settlement, the defendant, in this case the insurance company, is required to pay all of the plaintiff's attorney's fees, which are not, should we say, rack rate. I guess we can say that in a hotel. So it's not, they're not what you would get if you walked in off the street to pay, okay? It is an inflated fee, and so it is those fees that are driving up the cost. There's risk in Florida, right? We've got weather, we've got hurricanes. We see them coming 5 days away. Everybody goes and buys all the beer and toilet paper, and then it passes you by, and some other poor community suffers. There's risk everywhere in the United States from weather-related events. What is driving that, 3x differential in homeowners premiums is the lawsuit. It is the 7% of claims, 77%, because the system is set up to encourage that to happen. I think there's a question over here.
Yeah, so on affordable housing, has the chamber taken a view on the Senate bill? I think it's 102 that appears to be the first time that we're really putting money other than lip service of the state behind creating affordable housing and really addressing the forgotten middle and what I'll call workforce housing, the 80 to 120 AMI, the nurses that aren't coming.
Yeah. So to answer your question, the foundation does not get behind particular parts of legislation, but the Florida Chamber of Commerce is 100% behind President Pasadomo's Live Work bill, which is what we talked about. So what's in that bill, which does include, some streamlining of red tape, but also funding, is 100% what the Florida Chamber is supporting. I hope you all have a great conference. Okay, thanks for being here. Thanks for the work you're doing to help Florida's economy get from 16th to 10th. Have a great day.